listening to Second Wind with Joyce Buford, where women who are ready to expand their life adventure discover the tools to stop playing small and tap into the courage required to enjoy their second wind. Welcome.
Welcome, 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 wherever you are, to Second Wind with Joyce. I am absolutely thrilled that you're here today because, as always, I have another fantastic, fabulous guest that will share with you some of the transition that she went through in her life. Now, you know, one of the reasons I created Second Wind was because of the necessary to find support and transitional people that can help you move through whatever you are struggling with. And so my guest today is one of those ladies, because I really searched out for these ladies because they have so much to tell us. So let's get started. Her name is Andrea Jones, and she is a registered nurse and a BSN, which you just told me what that was. What is it?
Bachelor's of Science in Nursing.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And functional hormone coach. She is a wife and a mother of 2 girls. But one of her main working areas is with women all over the world to get rid of their painful periods, mood swings, irritability, fatigue, insomnia, and perimenopausal symptoms naturally. So if you're out there struggling with any of these conditions, then this is the program for you. You need to be listening and thinking about, who have I talked to this with? What friend have I shared this with? So get ready. Here we go. And welcome, Andrea.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's absolutely a privilege to be on your show and just sharing a little bit about my story, and hopefully that will inspire maybe somebody who was in a similar place as I was, that there is hope, there is healing, and there's, a whole life in front of you that you get to experience outside of the misery of those symptoms.
Well, tell me about when you were first. Have this always been a part of your earlier life that you were having difficulty in your period?
Yes. And, I always had painful periods pretty much, I would say, as far back as I remember. Once I started my cycle, they gradually got worse over time to where, even doubling up on Motrin and naproxen wouldn't cut it. Like, I would have to stay home from school, had really bad nausea. I wouldn't say that my periods were heavy necessarily, but they were very painful, and I always had really bad mood swings beforehand. So, and I was just told that's normal. That's, some girls just have really bad periods. And, I pushed through it because what other option do you have? You can't miss a week of school every single month. So,
was this primarily your doctor that was telling you this?
Mainly my mom. Like, she didn't really take me to the doctor for it other than our normal yearly checkup. She would just check in on it. And he just said to manage it with pain meds. And if we needed to do birth control, we could, but I really didn't want to do that. And so, it wasn't really until I had my first daughter that she was about 9 months old. My period came back after, a period of not having a cycle. And they were horrible, like the worst they had ever been. It was like, I don't know. I mean, it was a nightmare. So I started having really bad insomnia, which I had attributed to previously to my baby's not sleeping through the night. So you're not aware that there's this physical problem happening in your body, right? Insomnia, anxiety, panic attacks, that, my doctor just said, well, maybe it's postpartum, but it's kind of late for that. And I was like, no, I don't think this is postpartum. Like, it feels very much in my body. I'm not thinking about something and then having anxiety. Like, there's something going on in my body. And really what clued me in was some of those symptoms had been happening before my period came back. And so I didn't recognize that it was connected at all to my hormones. I just thought, I'm just postpartum-y. I don't know what else to
Mhm,
call it.
mhm, mhm.
And then my period came back with a vengeance. It was extremely heavy, worst
Mhm.
pain I'd ever had, and really bad nausea. And then I started losing weight
Mm.
rapidly. So I lost about 10 pounds in a week,
Wow.
um, and lost my milk supply and went to my conventional medicine doctor. And given my background in nursing, I'm very well versed in having conversations with doctors. That's a pretty huge part of my job. I
Yeah.
knew how to advocate for myself. I knew what to ask for. Um, and I was really shocked at how I was treated. And I know that that's not just me. I know it's not
Mhm,
personal.
mhm.
It happens to a lot of women. And so that's kind of what I want to give voice to. And it's eventually what catalyzed me into leaving my job, and doing what I'm doing now. But really, my doctor was very puzzled, and she was just like, well, it's kind of late for this to be postpartum depression. Your baby's almost 10 months old. We probably just need to put you on antidepressants. And I'm not opposed to that if there's a need for it. There is a legitimate need for that in circumstances, but I knew my body, and I knew that there was something wrong. Like,
Mhm.
can we just do some testing? Test my vitamin D, take a look at my thyroid, can we look at cortisol? Like, and
Yeah.
she just kind of looked at me like, no, you're too young to have any of those problems. And I'm like, well, clearly I'm not,
Yeah.
because I'm a hot mess sitting in
Yeah.
front of you, barely getting through the day. And I think why it was so important for me to get better was because my mother was actually very emotionally unstable for most of my life.
Uh-huh.
If she was diagnosed with anything, we don't know that for sure. She never disclosed it to us, but very similar to probably what I would categorize as, borderline personality disorder, that level
Mhm.
of dysfunction. And
Right.
so for me to not be regulated myself was not an option. That was
Right.
not an option. It was not like me. I was not going to raise my family like that. I was not going to put them through the trauma of all of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
And so behind, and this is something that I talk with women about a lot, behind those symptoms, behind the painful symptoms, there's always something deeper that's motivating you, because
Mhm.
it's not just the fact that you need to take a nap every day. What is that
Right.
keeping you from?
Right.
It's not just the fact that you have a low libido. What is it that you're missing out on that is driving you to get healing? Because for me, it was, I can't imagine raising my family feeling this way. I can't do it.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
it's too intense. I have,
Mhm.
a baby who's soon becoming a toddler, and it's going to be a whole lot of no's and a whole lot of pushback,
Right.
because that's what toddlers do. And am I going to
Right.
be able to handle that?
Well,
And
you were saying, how many years had you been in nursing by the time that you started talking with your doctor about this?
I would say it was about 4 years at that point.
Can you imagine how the lady must feel that has not goes in to see the doctor and has none of the issues of the knowledge that you have,
Oh,
which is
absolutely.
really like, oh, you were so, I know you might probably didn't, but I mean, it was just such a blessing that you had those 4 years and you understood
Right.
that, and you had with it, the the knowledge that this wasn't
Right.
normal
Right.
and you wanted to fix it.
Exactly. And
And
I think about that all the time. And it's actually one of the reasons why I love talking about this, because
mhm,
part of your story as a woman is getting empowered again
mhm,
to know what's normal and not normal for your body,
mhm,
and then be able to advocate and choose who you want to work with. Because if you're not getting the treatment that you need, there has to become that point of saying, okay, just because they said they can't help me or they won't help me doesn't mean that there's not somebody who will.
mm,
And
yeah,
I eventually had to get to that point. So I'd lost 10 pounds. I lost my milk supply within a week. I couldn't work because obviously, like, I was having horrible insomnia and anxiety. There's no way I can get through a 13-hour shift like that.
yes,
So we were already very, very short on income. I was very, very sick at that point. And so
mhm,
it was like a do or die
mhm,
moment.
mhm,
I'm like, I can't get a job if I'm feeling this way. I'm not going to lose my license. Like, there was a lot wrapped into that. And so after about the third or fourth doctor visit, where they basically told me they could give me, well, they're benzodiazepines, but basically anti-anxiety medication to shut off the anxiety response in my body. Excuse me. Or like, you're on your own, was kind of the thing. And I just was like, no, I will find somebody else who can help me. And it was hard because we didn't have the finances. I couldn't just, drop $800 to go find a specialist, but that's what I ended up doing. And thankfully I had a friend who referred me to somebody that she really trusted and was like, hey, we mainly see him for our son, but he says that he works with hormones on his website, so maybe just go check it out. Excuse me. And sorry for the listeners there. I've got a little tickle in my throat today all of a sudden. And I was so thankful he was able to get me in within about 2 weeks. I want to say a week, and it felt like the longest 2 weeks of my life because I was still very sick there. Especially with the panic attacks, that was really hard because it was every day, every single morning I would wake up, in this fight or flight response. And he took one look at me and, looked through all of my 15 pages of assessment that they do and said, I know exactly what's wrong. I know how to fix you. And
That's
great. I just started crying because it was the first time I felt I'm not crazy. Like, there is something actually. He's like, we do need to do some labs. We do want to, take a better picture of what's going on. But he was actually able to put together 3 main pieces for me. And one, physical, emotional, and some of the spiritual elements too. And just kind of look at that from a whole body perspective. And, that's really what really opened my eyes too, even as a nurse, to the fact that there was this whole other realm of medicine that I didn't learn about in college. And so that was, so every time he would tell me about something, I would dig in and research and find the evidence for it. And, and look at, oh, this has actually been around for 200 years. This is, there was science before there was conventional medicine. So, but it wasn't till about, let's see, I want to say 7 or 8 years after that I decided I was ready to leave the hospital and do this full time. So there was definitely a progression, like a career progression behind that, but that was more the personal, my personal experience.
Must have been tough on your family though, going through that. Your husband feeling so helpless, probably, I'm just guessing. But that's a totally different area than they know how to work in. And they don't, they hate seeing their loved ones suffer so much.
Right.
And
it was hard for him.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it was hard because he'd never experienced anxiety before for himself. So he didn't know what that feeling feels like. And I'm trying to explain to him, like, I have no control. I'm trying to get control. I'm doing the best that I can. I've never been this sick before. And so thankfully it was, for him, it was never a question of whether or not we need to invest in this. Like, we're going to invest in it. Like, you're going to get better. It was never about me having to prove whether or not it was worth it for him, which I'm really thankful for. And he came to a lot of the appointments with me, and
that's great.
And so he got to learn and, ask the doctor, how can I help, in those moments? What can I do? And so he was very present, in that journey, and as much as a man can be present in that journey,
Well,
not understanding all the ins and outs.
How was it being the mother with the baby? I mean, did you find any difficulties there? Because you just didn't feel good. I can imagine it was kind of difficult.
It was hard. I tried, I definitely was napping when she was napping, which meant that there was not a lot that I was getting done around the house as far as, our daily chores and stuff like that. It was hard with the insomnia because I literally wouldn't fall asleep until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning most days. And then she was up at 6. So I was getting maybe 2 to 3 hours. So it was very hard. and I just pushed through, and I look back at pictures and I'm like, you would never know, like I took her on walks every single day. We walked like 3 miles a day, always took her to the park, and just kind of faked it till I made it. But
Mhm.
it was hard. And,
Mhm.
but she really was the catalyst for so much healing for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, even when I talk about the three kind of big elements that he put together, one of them was the emotional impact, which was, hey, have you actually gotten help for um, what it was like being raised by your mother?
Oh, yeah.
And he was the one, he's like, because your body will store the trauma and it's showing up
Mhm.
as panic and anxiety, and the stress on your adrenal glands. And so, while it was a horrible experience, I kind of look back and I wonder, had somebody not pointed it out, would I have recognized how much I was suffering, number one, and number two, that I actually, part of my physical healing was getting emotional healing. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah.
Like there were
Yeah.
some aspects of my physical body that wouldn't come into alignment until we addressed the emotional aspect of that too.
Right. Which
Yeah.
happened in your 3, 4, 5, most of early childhood? Are
Yeah.
those the areas you went back and worked with?
Well, it was there were a lot of different, periods of time. Some of them were pre-verbal.
Mm.
And but the, what, like if you're talking about working memory, so, active memories, a lot of those were like, but actually between the ages of 3 and 8. So, which, is a pretty
Yeah.
developmentally
Yeah.
pivotal personality forming time. And so,
Mhm.
um, granted, you don't do it all at once, right? You take little baby steps and you work through what you have. And but it was very interesting parenting my daughter at that time, because that's really what forced me to confront what I didn't receive. It was like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm really being confronted here with not having a nurturing mom, or not having a mom that would play with me, or, and how that impacted my internal world. And so it was a very, very painful, like vulnerable time, in a lot of ways, partly because of the hormones, but also because of, I was just walking through my own healing at the time.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. So I guess you visited with I'm Not Enough.
Hmm.
Was that one of those? Of course,
Say that name
most
again.
I'm not enough
Oh, yeah.
in your because that's something most women deal with. I'm
Hmm.
just not enough. I've been
Hmm.
rejected. Mother likes her better.
Hmm.
So many things like that, and so many women carry that
Yep.
until they work with a coach
Yep.
or a therapist or somebody that
Exactly.
can see that woundedness in
Yep.
us. So you okay. So your progression was now you are a hormone coach, and
Hmm.
you developed that when
So I started working on a program. I used the word program loosely because at the time I didn't know it was going to be a program. Um, I
oh
started really doing research, really digging into the research, and like, I wonder, I took kind of everything that I learned from my own experience, and I was like, I wonder if there's an easier way, because it took me about 4 years to really get like my body in balance. And I'm like, most
mhm,
people don't want to invest 4 years of their lives balancing their hormones. I'm not sure I would have said yes if he'd said, by the way, it's going to take you 4 years to feel better. Um, and so I just thought, I wonder if there's a simpler process that can really catalyze some pretty transformative change in a shorter period of time.
mhm,
And so that's when I started researching again. I now have 2 kids at the time. And because of everything that I learned, I really learned some boundaries around work and burnout. And
mhm,
it's never worth it,
mhm,
to work overtime if you don't need to. I really learned how to take care of myself in that journey, and really protect myself, but really also pursue what, the avenues in nursing that were most interesting to me, that I was most
mhm,
gifted in. And that was really freeing for me to get out of there's only one way to do things, to no, there's
mhm,
100 ways to do this
mhm.
well.
Mhm.
And so I was kind of building it in the background without realizing that's what I was doing. I was laying the foundation for eventually leaving.
Mhm.
And really, came down to three basic things that every woman's hormones need in order to be in balance. And this was,
Mhm.
proven over and over and over in literature, that, we've got to have a healthy liver. We've got to have a healthy gut brain connection, which we
Mm.
know that emotional trauma
Mhm.
will impact that gut brain connection. So we can't address hormone health without also addressing our emotional health. So that is a huge part of our program too, is addressing mindset and stuff like that. And then adequate nutrients. We have to have nutrients that actually help to build progesterone and estrogen at the right time of the month. And then researching what's the physiology of the body
Mhm.
that we can work with the body instead of against it. So we're not forcing a process, we're just supporting a process. To where, we're able to get the majority of my clients completely symptom free in less than 4 months. So,
Really?
mhm.
Mm.
So, because we just work with the body. It's gentle, but very effective. And so, transition to teaching nursing students, because again, I have 2 kids, and then one of them received a neurological diagnosis. And I just needed something that was a lot better for our family than doing shift work for us at the time. So that was an amazing experience. Getting to teach nursing students was so fun. And it provided a great segue to me eventually launching it as a program where, multiple women can do it at the same time.
Right.
And then, I had no idea that it would eventually become international to where we're in 7 different countries. And I have a team, a nutritionist and other coaches. And that was not in my original blueprint. So
Well, I think I've only interviewed one other woman that had this topic,
oh,
and that was
really?
years ago.
Okay.
Yes, but
Wow.
there was no go find a hormone coach when you were going through this. You had to do most of your research.
Yep.
You may be my second hormone coach that I've ever met, and
Yep.
so there was a lot of research was required. I
A
mean,
lot
you
of
were
research.
the subject, so you could kind of use yourself. You
Right.
understood, and that gave you some guidance.
Yes.
But still,
Yes.
that's pretty amazing. And I'm grateful for the woman, the listener out there that is dealing with
Yes.
these
Right.
problems.
Well, and I think, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think as nurses, naturally, we're innovators,
Mm-hmm.
because we're put in situations where we have to creatively problem solve, right? And I'm always thinking about, the night shifts that I used to do where we'd run out of supplies and we're like, we have to jimmy rig,
Oh,
this thing to work, and still fit in the standards of procedures. So if you run out of an IV pole or an IV tubing, like, how are we going to problem solve this? And that's always been how I have been wired, is to innovate and problem solve and be creative about it. But the science part of me is very much, this has to be evidence based. This has to be proven with what we have in literature, and also understanding that science evolves over time, which means when we get better information, we're going to take that better information and we're now going to apply it. So the things that my doctor was telling me about birth control 20 years ago, we now have better science that says, hey, while that may benefit some women, there's a larger group of women that actually have some long-term negative impacts of birth control. So we need to be really careful with how we're prescribing that and recommending that to people. So, so to me, it's fun because I love to research. So give me a topic and I'll dive into it, all day long. But yeah.
So how did you start building your coaching once you decided on a program?
Yes.
And I maybe there is a basic program. I'm kind of thinking everybody's so unusual,
Right.
but maybe there is a base that you start with. And is that true?
Yes. So for how my program works, I'll kind of answer this in 2 parts. So first, I actually brought it to a team of health professionals, so nutritionists, boards of nutritionists, and had them review all of my research and content, had them give me feedback, give me tweaks, and be like, this is how we could make this a little bit better. And then you use that protocol with clients, and then you get feedback on how can we make this better, what do we need to improve, et cetera. So that's always going to be a working process. Right. But every single woman works through the same foundations because those are essential for, overall body health. But for women, especially their hormones. So we take that foundation for every woman. And why coaching is a little bit different is that we're then seeing, okay, when you do this action step, this is how your body responds. So we need to adjust this, and this, so that we're getting you to your end goal, which may be very different as a menopausal or perimenopausal woman than a mom who's, down to her last nursing feeding and wants to just get a regular cycle back, right? Those goals are going to be different. The foundations are the same, but we're taking that very much, one-on-one approach of we're looking at your nutrition, we're looking at your digestion, we're looking at your lifestyle, your mental habits, your emotional habits, because all of those are going to impact how your body assimilates what you're doing. And so that's part of what makes it so successful is the one-on-one individual aspect.
Right. So if one of my listeners wants to join your program or is thinking of it, does she go, well, first you need to go to her website, which is, let me go here, website, goabundantwellnesswithandrea.com.
Yes. So go.abundantwellnesswithandrea.com. Okay. So yes, you can find a lot of information there. We do quite a bit of education in my Facebook education group. So we have monthly training, sometimes more frequently than that. Obviously podcast is a great way to kind of get a feel for my approach and philosophy. And
you do have a podcast, and what is its name so they can listen?
Not to be repetitive, but it's the Abundant Wellness with Andrea podcast, and it's thriving in mind, body, and spirit. So we talk about other things besides hormones, but hormones is really the basis there. And then what we typically do is, if somebody's interested in working with me, it's by application only. So we don't just have a web page that people can jump into the program. I want to make sure that they're actually a really good fit, medically, emotionally, physiologically, all of that stuff. So we typically do a breakthrough call, and get a really good picture of what's going on with their overall hormones, what they've tried before, what hasn't worked for them before. All of those things are really important pieces of information. So that would be the best way.
And how they must just breathe a sigh of relief after visiting with you. Somebody that can hear their symptoms and know they're not crazy.
Right.
And they're not brought on by some other extenuation. It's all happening in the person.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they're not crazy. And, so often they feel like they are because they go to the doctor and they're put on birth control that makes them feel worse. And then if they complain about it, it's like, there's something wrong with you instead of the method. Does that make sense? When really it's the method that's broken. And so, yes, that's actually one of my favorites is when they're just like, I finally feel like I have what I need. And that's like, I wish I had this 10 years ago. So
what a great feeling that must be for you.
It is. I love it. And for me, I think the biggest win is not just them getting rid of their symptoms. Like, yay, I had the magical period is what we call it, where there's no symptoms whatsoever. It's just Aunt Flo shows up and she leaves and everything's fine.
Aunt Flo.
Yeah. That's what some people call it.
Oh, that's funny.
But we call it the magical period because it feels pretty magical when it happens. But it's really the family transformation that happens. That's a byproduct of that because the woman feels like herself. She feels like her best self. She's able to show up for her family. She's able to have hard conversations where maybe she couldn't before. She's able to get on the floor and play with her kids again. It's, to me, that's what it's about. It's about the legacy of you getting to be you, unhindered, without all of that stuff in the way. That really is what makes it worth it.
Yeah. Now you talk about the 3 parts.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah. So the 3, we work on 3 main foundations in the Happy Hormones program. And obviously there are multiple steps in each of those, but the first one is what we call the hormone flush. And so what we found in a lot of the literature, and this is being proven over and over and over again in multiple different avenues now, is that the liver plays a huge role in your hormones. And I bet you, if you're listening, this is probably the first time that you have ever heard that your liver has anything to do with your hormones. And so you're probably just as shocked as I was when I first learned that. But your liver actually is the main driver of whether or not you metabolize estrogen. And so if you're not metabolizing estrogen, there's a lot of different reasons why that can be happening. Then we need to support the body's natural ability to do that, because if we don't get estrogen into a healthy range to where you're not having breast tenderness, you're not having heavy painful periods, migraines, endometriosis, all of those are really high estrogen symptoms. Anything that you do to balance your progesterone is not going to work, because progesterone and estrogen are seesaw hormones. So if your estrogen's high, your progesterone is always going to be capped no matter what you do until we get that down to a healthy level. So we do that primarily through nutrition. And again, that's one-on-one, based on the individual in front of us. Then we start working on, I call it the mood, energy, libido regulating protocol, but that's essentially healing the gut-brain connection. And all of the different components of that, which, balancing the microbiome, getting the neurotransmitters in the gut, wake them up so that they're actually doing their job, but also healing those more like social, emotional aspects of stress and mindset and emotional trauma, like that does come up. And so making sure that there's a place for women to process that they're learning tools to process that. Because, we can teach you all the foods to eat, we can teach you the lifestyle, but if you have stuff going on the inside, like I did, that is a part of your process, unless we get you out of that fight or flight that's going on, we're going to only see partial. And so it is really important to address that. And then the third aspect is, I call it nourishing hormones, but essentially it's learning what foods to incorporate into your diet that support healthy hormone production. So estrogen, progesterone, primarily, all of their little metabolites. In a nutshell.
Yes. But you take their hand, the lady that is calling you. You take her by the hand and you walk her through this, so it's not an overwhelming transition.
And they just do one action step at a time. So they have their weekly training video that they do on their own, that explains what they're doing, what's going on in their body. They've got their one action step, and then we work with them to make sure that it's working for them, that they're seeing progress and overcoming those hurdles of, how do I do this when I have kids running around the house screaming at me all day long, So all of those things.
So you have really grown you realize this is bigger than me. I need some support.
Yes.
And so how did you make that? That's a very business oriented thinking. So how did you make that transition?
Well, I've always had a business coach. So even, once I realized that I really wanted this to be more of a group coaching aspect, I knew that I needed to learn how to do that. I've, as nurses, we're used to working in teams, we're used to collaborating. That's that's just kind of part of how we're wired, I think, for the most part.
Mhm.
And working with interdisciplinary teams. So I was used to pulling other people in. But really, it's funny because my administrative assistant slash stepped into like the hormone coaching role, is a great friend of mine now, but she was actually one of the first graduates in my program. And I didn't even recognize that I was at the point where I needed help. Like I just thought, oh, I'm just really busy and this is what busy feels like.
Yes.
And she was like, hey, if you ever need an admin, I would love to help you. Like I love what you do. This program has absolutely transformed my life. However, I, can support you. And that's really what kicked it in. I knew eventually I might need a team. I didn't think it would be that soon. I didn't think it would be, less than a year into running this program. So
wow. Let's go.
yes.
So you have people all over the world.
Yes, we do.
Because no matter what country they're from, we are basically all alike.
Yeah, it's true.
Women. Yeah.
Yes. Their words might be different. The language or the expression is going to be a little bit different, but the problems are the same. So we've had, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Canada. I'm forgetting a few. Yeah, there's more. I just can't think of what they are at the moment. So
do you even have a need for bringing all those, back in the day, they would get everybody and they'd come together and they'd have a mega workshop or a day or a week or 3 days, or
yeah.
do you have any need for that in your community?
Yeah, so I do once a month, I do a workshop, and we just invite everybody, everybody that's on the email list, everybody that's in the group. We target, specific, so if 1 month it's perimenopause, the next month it's menopause, these symptoms, and really just kind of keep it specific to the need. We haven't done a whole lot of in-person, mainly just with the pandemic. That's been a little bit challenging, but online, yes.
Through Zoom, I assume.
Zoom. Yep. Zoom is amazing. What would we do without it? Right. So yes, mainly through Zoom, which is great because then people, from Boston or Pennsylvania or, we've had a couple from, either Northern Africa join a couple times and they get to do that because we have the internet. So makes it fun.
Yeah, I kind of like the internet and the convenience it's brought because I spent so many of my earlier years getting on a plane.
Yes.
And this is really nice. I know some people say, well, it's not quite like the fuzzy touch.
Yes.
And there is a little bit of that missing. So I wouldn't say it wasn't, but as far as the convenience, I think it's pretty cool.
Yes, it definitely, it helps make everything work, and the nutritionist that works with me in the program, she lives 30 to 45 minutes away. And so it's beautiful that we get to, that she doesn't have to drive into work. We can just hop on and help the ladies whenever we need to. And it just works wonderfully. So
yeah. Well, we are approaching near the end of our show today, and it's just been packed full of good information.
Oh, thank you.
And I know you have connected with a listener that's going, oh, praise God, there's somebody that has some answers for me.
Yes.
So I do hope that you get some calls.
Well, thank you.
Definitely, I want them to go to your website. Would you like to quote that, give that to them again?
Yes. So it's go, which is go.abundantwellnesswithandrea.com.
And then the Facebook is also a great resource for them. And that is?
Yeah. So the Facebook group is Get Control of Your Periods, PMS, and Perimenopause. So it's long, but it's very specific. So
well, where does the Abundant Wellness with Andrea come in?
That
on
is
Facebook.
That is, well, you can go to my business page. I do have a business page, but then the community group is the Get Control of Your Period. That's where a lot of the education happens.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Which that will be advertised on the business page, but we try to keep it private so that women can actually have conversations and share things that might be a little bit, they don't want to post that on my wall necessarily. So
and then your podcast, share that one more time.
Yes. So it's Abundant Wellness with Andrea podcast. So from surviving to thriving in mind, body, and spirit.
So what do you primarily do on the podcast?
So I bring in guests. We're still only about 3 months in, I should say. So I think I started at the end of May. So it's still kind of a baby podcast. I'm a newbie. So I'm still learning the ropes. So if you guys, hear me learning the ropes, you're welcome to join for the ride. But I definitely, try to tackle all three of those subjects. So mind, body, spirit. So Erin Carey's been on. We talked a lot about mental health and how hormones impact mental health, how that affects, family units, et cetera. We talk about all the different, ways that our hormones can, manifest different problems in the body, specific strategies. So it's been really fun, and I'm just kind of letting it be what it is and not trying to force it to be something that it should be or shouldn't be, if that makes sense. So kind of letting it evolve on its own. But really the point is to just get the information to the listeners who need it that maybe are not on social media, so.
Oh yes, that's a group.
Yes.
But that brings up another thought for me. This is mainly, is this mainly in what ages?
So typically, I would say the majority of women that I work with are between 30 and 55. If, we kind of have subcategories in there. So the women who are, in their 30s to 40s are still having pretty regular cycles. They're not in the perimenopausal age, which requires a little bit different support. And then menopausal women or post-hysterectomy clients that they require a different approach as well, because their body's not making the same hormones. And so how do we support your health as you transition with as minimal symptoms as possible? So they're kind of three separate categories, but all about within that 30 to 55-ish age. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I have one question I ask everybody.
Shoot.
Everybody.
Okay.
What was the most powerful decision you made toward your success, and would you do it again?
Without question, I did not even have to think about my answer. Investing in a coach. 100%. And I am not saying that because I need you to invest in me, listeners. I'm saying that because there came a point, I went to nursing school to be a nurse, right? I didn't go to nursing school to run an international business. So I had to, at some point, I knew I had the medical background. I knew all that stuff. That's there. That's solid. But if I want to get this to as many people as I can that need to hear my voice and what I have to say, then I have to learn how to do that. And so for me, investing was a no-brainer because I knew that there was mental stuff I had to get over. I knew there was mindset stuff I needed to address. And I would say the same thing is true for hormones. If you've hit a wall and every avenue that you've tried isn't working, then it's not you that's the problem, it's the method. And so investing in yourself, investing in your health for your family will never be wasted because you're always going to learn something. So that would be I would absolutely, do it all over again. So
how do you feel about the you today?
It's funny because I was thinking about what my life was like. I guess my daughter's 11 now, so 11-ish years ago. And I feel like every year I just get healthier and happier. And that doesn't mean my life is perfect. My life is definitely not perfect. We all have challenges, and we've all had to navigate hard times. But for me, I love who I am now, and I love what I'm growing into. And so the journey has, made me a huge part of who I am. And so I treasure that too.
Yes, that's awesome.
Well, thank you.
I cannot thank you enough. This has been so interesting. And I just thank you for reaching out and being on Second Wind because it has
absolutely
been great to help others.
Well, thank you. It's been a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. And I can't wait to share you and all that you bring to my audience as well.
Okay. I'm going to speak just a few minutes to my listeners and then don't go away.
Okay.
All right. I like to always give you the same assignment, but every week I just feel compelled. And I know if you are not the listener that needs this information, you certainly have run up against a friend, a family member, somebody that needs to hear the message. And think what you could do for them. Oh my gosh, you could change their world and their happiness and how they feel about themselves. Gosh, that's a lot of power there. So anyway, I hope you'll share this. I don't want to get too excited about it because I'm actually having chills as I talk to you about this. But I do hope that you'll reach out. But I do hope you will be here again next week when we will be talking with another fabulous lady. So thank you for being here today. Bye. Have a great week.
Joyce Buford returns next week at the same time for another edition of Second Wind. Through the Joyce Buford Empowerment System, women are receiving the support they need through their transitions and are able to reclaim their true purpose with confidence. They receive the tools they need to map out new lives. You can find out more about her coaching services at joycebufordempowers.com.